I want to ask you something before we go any further, and I want you to sit with it honestly rather than answering too quickly. Think about the season you are in right now, the work you are doing, the position you currently hold, the chapter of your life that is open in front of you at this moment, and ask yourself, does it look like what you thought it would look like by now? Does it feel like the place where you expected to be spending these years? Is the assignment in front of you the one you would have chosen if the choosing had been left entirely to you? For most people, the honest answer to that question is no, not entirely. There is some gap, sometimes a small one, sometimes a yawning one, between the life that was imagined and the life that is actually being lived, between the role that was hoped for and the role that has been assigned, between the door that was expected to open and the door that actually opened, which turned out to be a different door entirely in a different building on a different street, leading somewhere that was not on the original map. I know that gap intimately. I lived inside it for more than 20 years. And what I want to share with you today is what I learned during those years, not what I read about them afterward, not what I concluded from a comfortable distance, but what I came to understand from the inside of an assignment that the world would have called invisible, marginal, beneath a man of any real ability or purpose. I want to tell you what was actually happening during all those years I spent opening a door, because it was not what it appeared to be. It was never what it appeared to be. And if you are currently in a season that does not appear to be what you believed your life was for, I want you to hear what I have to say very carefully, because I believe it is for you. I arrived at St. Bonaventure Monastery in Detroit in 1924. I was 53 years old. I had already spent nearly 2 decades in New York at Sacred Heart Parish in Yonkers, then at Our Lady of Sorrows in Manhattan, then at Our Lady Queen of Angels up in Harlem. And in each of those places, I had served as sacristan, as porter, as the man who handled the practical and often invisible work of a religious house. I had not preached, I had not heard confessions. The ordination that had given me the title of priest had withheld, by formal decision, the 2 activities most associated with that title. I was a priest who could not exercise the primary functions of a priest. And now I was being assigned in Detroit to answer the door. I want to be precise about what that meant in practice, because I think the concrete reality of it matters. My assignment was to stand at the entrance of the monastery and receive whoever arrived, to open the door when someone knocked, to hear whatever they had come to say, to direct them to whoever could help, and in cases where prayer seemed appropriate, to pray with them and enroll them in the Seraphic Mass Association, which was the way our order organized intercession for the sick and the suffering. That was the work. Door, knock, open, listen, pray, close, repeat. On the face of it, this is not the biography of a man who is being prepared for something. This is the biography of a man who has been placed somewhere and left there. And I will be honest with you, there were mornings in those early years when I stood at that door in the early light before anyone had arrived, and I felt the full weight of what my life appeared to be. A man in his 50s, with no formal preaching faculty, no confessional, no congregation, no platform, no influence in any direction that the church or the world would recognize as influence. A man opening a door. What sustained me in those mornings was not optimism. I was not a naturally optimistic person in the temperamental sense. I was an Irish farmer's son who had grown up understanding that the land does not always cooperate and the weather does not always agree with your plans, and the careful work of one season can be undone by a single bad frost. What sustained me was something more durable than optimism. It was a conviction held in faith rather than in feeling, that God does not place a person somewhere without a reason, that the assignment I had been given, however it appeared from the outside, was not an accident of circumstances or a consequence of my inadequacy. It was a placement, deliberate, purposeful, fitted to something I could not yet see. I want to stay with that conviction for a moment because I think it is one of the most financially and practically significant spiritual beliefs a person can hold, and I think most people have never examined it carefully. The belief that God is present in the placement that the season you are currently in, with all its apparent limitations and all its distance from what you imagined, is not a detour from your purpose, but is actively constituting your purpose. That belief changes everything about how you inhabit your present circumstances. The person who believes their current situation is a mistake, a delay, a punishment, or simply the random result of an indifferent universe relates to that situation in a very specific way. They endure it. They manage it. They keep their real attention pointed toward the future version of their life that will finally be worth inhabiting, and they sleepwalk through the present, waiting for it to end. I watched this in people who came to my door for decades. Men in jobs they had decided were beneath them, who were coasting through their days, waiting for the real opportunity to arrive. Women in circumstances they had decided were temporary, who were withholding their full investment until things improved. People in seasons they had decided were meaningless, who were therefore extracting from those seasons none of the meaning that was actually available in them. And the tragedy, and I use the word carefully because I believe it genuinely is a tragedy, is that the meaning and the preparation and the formation that those seasons contained was going entirely to waste. Not because it was not there, but because the person was not present to receive it. Now, let me tell you what was actually happening at that door during my 20 years there, because I think it illuminates what I mean by formation and preparation in a way that abstract language cannot. In those first years, I was learning something that no seminary curriculum had taught me and no book had adequately described. I was learning how to be present to a human being, not present in the polite, attentive sense that a trained professional develops. Present in the deeper sense, genuinely there, genuinely available, genuinely receiving whatever this particular person with their particular history and their particular pain and their particular hope had come to bring. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Most people, when they are listening to another person, are simultaneously running an interior commentary, evaluating, categorizing, preparing their response, comparing this story to other stories they have heard, thinking about what comes next. True presence, the kind that another person can actually feel, the kind that produces in them the sensation of being genuinely seen and genuinely received, is a capacity that must be developed. It is not natural, it is not automatic. It is built slowly through practice and through the decision made again and again to set aside the interior commentary and simply be there. I had 20 years of practice. Every single day, in encounter after encounter, I was being formed in the capacity to be fully present to whoever was in front of me. And what I discovered over those years was that this capacity was not merely spiritually significant. It was the most practically powerful thing I had to offer. More powerful than theological knowledge, more powerful than formal preaching ability, more powerful than any credential or title or institutional authority. The simple, radical experience of being genuinely received by another human being, of feeling, even for a few minutes, that someone is truly here with you in your difficulty, is something that most people are desperately hungry for and almost never find. And the door was the school in which I was learning to give it. I also was learning during those years something about the relationship between faithfulness in small things and capacity for large ones. Jesus said it plainly, the person who is faithful in very little is faithful also in much, and the person who is dishonest in very little is dishonest also in much. I had read those words many times before I arrived at that door, but it was at the door that I began to understand them in the way you understand something that has become part of your body. rather than merely part of your mind. Each encounter at that door, each individual person who arrived with whatever they had brought with them was a complete thing, a complete demand for faithfulness, not a rehearsal for a more important encounter that would come later, not a warm up for the real ministry that awaited me somewhere down the road, a complete self contained call to give everything I had to this moment, to this person right now. And I learned by doing this thousands of times that faithfulness is not a fixed quantity that you either have or you do not. It is a capacity that grows with use. The faithfulness I brought to the 10,000th encounter at that door was genuinely larger than the faithfulness I brought to the first, not because I had accumulated more knowledge or refined my technique, but because the practice of complete presence in small moments had enlarged my ability to offer complete presence in any moment. This is the compound interest of faithfulness. It is as real as the financial version, and it operates by exactly the same principle. Small deposits made consistently and without exception accumulate into a capacity that could not have been built any other way. You cannot skip the daily deposits and arrive at the compound result. The result is made of the deposits. It is not separable from them. And this is why the season that looks like nothing is almost never actually nothing. It is the season of deposits. It is the season in which the account is being built that will later produce the fruit that others will see and wonder at, having no idea how long the ground was being prepared before anything appeared above the surface. Let me tell you about something I observed in the people who came to my door that is directly relevant to the financial lives of the people watching this. Among the many thousands of people I sat with over those years, there was a particular type of conversation that repeated itself with enough frequency that I came to recognize it the moment it began. It was the conversation of the person who was waiting. Not waiting in the patient, trustful sense I have been describing, but waiting in the suspended sense, waiting for the right conditions to finally arrive before investing fully in their present life. I will describe it as I heard it most often. A man, though it was sometimes a woman, would come to the door, and after we had spoken for a while about whatever immediate difficulty had brought him there, the conversation would drift toward the larger shape of his life. And he would say something like, I know what I am supposed to be doing. I can see it clearly, but the conditions are not right yet. The timing is not right. I do not have enough saved, or the market is not right, or the people I need to know are not yet available to me, or I need to develop one more skill, learn one more thing, reach one more threshold before I can really begin. And so I am waiting. I heard this so many times in so many forms that I came to understand it as one of the most common and most costly spiritual errors a person can make in relation to their work and their finances. The error is not in recognizing that preparation matters or that timing is real. The error is in the location of the preparation. The person who is waiting for conditions to improve before beginning to invest fully is looking for the preparation to come from outside, from better circumstances, more resources, more favorable timing. But the preparation that actually builds the capacity to do the work is the preparation that happens inside the unfavorable conditions. It is the faithfulness practiced in the season that does not look like the right season. It is the full investment made in the present assignment, even when the present assignment is not the desired one. I could not have served the people who came to that door the way I eventually served them if I had spent my years there waiting for a more suitable assignment. The capacity I brought to those encounters was built from those encounters. There was no shortcut. There was no way to skip the door and arrive at the formation that the door produced. The door was not the waiting room for the real work. The door was the real work. And the real work, faithfully done in the season in which it was given, produced a person who was capable of something that the person who arrived at that door in 1924 could not yet do. I want to say something now about the relationship between this principle and money, because I think there is a very specific application here that most people miss. One of the most common financial mistakes I observed, not in books or in theory, but in the actual lives of actual people, was the mistake of deferring the habits that build financial health until the circumstances seemed more suitable for them. The person who planned to begin saving when the income was larger. The person who intended to live within their means once the current difficulty had passed. The person who was going to give generously once there was clearly enough to spare. The person who would begin tracking their spending, building the discipline, making the consistent small decisions once things settled down. What I observed over and over was that the settling down never came. Not because the circumstances never improved, sometimes they did, sometimes dramatically, but because the habits had not been built during the season when the building was difficult, and so when the more favorable season arrived, the person entered it with the same interior financial life they had always had. More resources flowing through the same undeveloped channels, and the resources predictably flowed through and were gone, leaving the person exactly where they had been, except now at a higher income level. The habits are built in the hard season, or they are not built at all. The discipline of the small amount, practiced faithfully when there is very little, becomes the discipline that handles the larger amount when it arrives. The person who cannot be faithful with the small thing cannot be trusted with the large thing, not because God is withholding the large thing as a punishment, but because the large thing requires capacities that are only developed through the practice of the small thing. The door comes first, always. I want to tell you about the moment when I began to understand fully what my years at the door had been preparing me for. It was not a sudden revelation. It arrived gradually over a period of years as I began to notice what was happening in the lives of the people who came to see me. Not just in the moment of our conversation, but afterward. People wrote letters, people came back. And in those letters and those return visits, I began to see a pattern that I had not been aware of in the individual moments, but that became unmistakable as it accumulated. People were changing, not in small ways, in the deep ways that are almost never produced by external circumstances, the ways that come from an encounter that reaches through the surface of a person and touches something that had not been touched in a long time. Men who had been hardened by years of disappointment were softening. Women who had carried grief so long it had become their entire identity were beginning slowly to put it down. Families that had been fracturing were finding something to hold. And in many of these cases, the practical dimensions of their lives, their finances, their work, their capacity to provide and to build were also changing, because the interior change and the exterior change are not separate. They never are. The person whose interior life has been healed or opened or enlarged brings a different capacity to every practical task in front of them. And I began to understand that this was what the door had been for. Not just the listening, not just the prayer, not just the individual moments of encounter, but the cumulative effect of 20 years of full presence, 20 years of deposits in the account of faithfulness, 20 years of treating the person in front of me as the complete and self-sufficient purpose of this moment. All of that had built something that could not have been built faster or by a more impressive assignment, something that was now flowing out through those encounters into the lives of people I would never fully know, changing things I would never fully see. The door was never just a door. It was a school, a forge, a place of formation that looked from the outside like nothing at all. I want to speak directly now to the person who is in the middle of their own version of the door, the person who is in the job that feels beneath them, the season that feels like a detour, the assignment that looks nothing like the life they planned. I want to speak directly to you because I think you are the person this is most for, and I do not want to lose you in the more general teaching. What I want to say to you is this: the preparation is happening right now, not when you arrive at the better circumstance, not when the more suitable season begins. Right now, in this door, in this assignment, in this apparently insufficient and apparently temporary situation. The formation that will make you capable of what comes next is being built from your faithfulness in what is present now. Every day you bring your full attention to work that does not feel worthy of your full attention, you are building something. Every day you practice the disciplines, financial, relational, spiritual, in conditions that make the practice difficult, you are building something. Every day you choose genuine presence in the season you are actually in, rather than sleepwalking through it toward an imagined future season, you are building something. You cannot see what you are building. That is part of what makes it so difficult. The compound interest of faithfulness does not display itself in real time. It accumulates quietly, invisibly in the interior of a life, and it does not become visible until it is ready to become visible, which is always later than you would have chosen. This is why the door requires faith in the specific, active sense, not faith as an emotion, not faith as a vague optimism about eventual improvement, but faith as a decision to act as though the present moment is exactly as significant as God says it is, regardless of whether it feels that way. I was at that door for more than 20 years before the fullness of what it had been building became clear. 20 years is a long time. I will not pretend otherwise. There were days that were genuinely hard to inhabit, days when the gap between what I had imagined and what I was doing was more painful to look at than other days. I did not eliminate those days through technique or spiritual discipline. I simply continued. I opened the door. I received whoever was there. I offered what I had, which was often not much. And I gave thanks, as my Father had taught me, for the specific, ordinary grace of the day in front of me. And God, who had placed me at that door for reasons I could not see, was building, in the years of that faithfulness, a person who would one day be visited by hundreds of human beings every single day, each of them carrying something real and fragile, each of them needing to feel that they had been genuinely received by another person who was genuinely present. The person who could do that, the person who had been formed by 20 years of small deposits into the capacity for full presence, was not born at the door. He was made there. Whatever door is in front of you today, I want to ask you to look at it differently than you have been looking at it. Not as a limitation, not as a detour, not as evidence that the life you were supposed to have has not yet arrived. Look at it as a school. Look at it as the specific, deliberate placement of a God who is not indifferent to the formation of the person he made you to be. Look at it as the place where the deposits are being made that will compound in ways you cannot yet predict into something you cannot yet imagine. Open it. Every day, open it. Give to whoever is on the other side the full faithfulness that you would give if you knew this moment was being watched, recorded, preserved. Because in the sense that matters most, it is. Not by an audience. By the slow accumulation of a life. By the interior account of faithfulness that cannot be audited from the outside, but that determines more than almost anything else what you will be capable of when the larger thing arrives. The door prepared me for everything. I did not understand that while I was there. I understand it now. And if I could stand at your door today, and you could look at me across that little table the way so many people did for so many years, I would tell you the same thing I told them in every version of every conversation about the life that appeared to be going wrong. God has not lost sight of you. He has not made a mistake with your placement. The season you are in is not an obstacle to your purpose. It is your purpose right now, in this moment. Give it everything. Appreciate it, specifically and genuinely for what it actually contains. And wait, not passively, but actively, faithfully, with your full attention and your full investment in the present moment for what the faithful opening of this particular door is preparing you to do. It will be more than you imagined. I have seen it happen too many times to doubt it. The door is never just a door. It is always, always the beginning of everything. Thank you for being here with me today. If what I have shared has reached something in you that needed to be reached, I would be grateful if you would leave a word below. Tell me where you are, what door is in front of you, and what you are beginning to understand about it. Share this with someone who is in a difficult or invisible season and needs to hear that the season is not wasted. And if you want to continue this walk together, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. God bless you, and God keep you faithful in every small thing.